time once again to slip into your camo, grab your bow, and join us out in the field for another episode of the Up North Journal, presented by PSE Archery. The Up North Journal crew is knocked and ready to rock for another exciting adventure. So let's step outside and hit the trail.
This episode of the Up North Journal podcast is brought to you by PSE Archery,
Spot Shooters Archery,
Easy Cut,
Packer Max,
Hunter's Blend Coffee,
Scent Lock,
Scent Blocker,
Lim Walker Game Calls,
Buck Baits,
Gut Check,
Stanislavski Release Aids,
Copper John,
Fourth Arrow Camera Arms,
WindSense Vapor Hunting Products,
and Rebel 6 Rubs. And don't forget, you can catch us in syndication at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on goodtalkradio.com.
Welcome to a special edition of Up North Journal. And that's right, folks. You don't hear Mike Adams. You hear Dan DeFaw in the chair. Because it's a special night. It's a Wednesday. And I actually have a new co-host. It's Ken. What's happening?
What's happening, Danny? Glad to be here. Feels good to be in the Up North Journal studio tonight.
It's a little warm. There's no mic. Well, we got mics in front of us, but
right.
There's no mic. Actually, Mike's off camera, actually producing it. That's kind of weird. But anyways, welcome to the show. Before we get the show started, we got a special guest. We'll be talking with from all the way from Arkansas. But before we do, make sure you get over to Hunter's Blend Coffee and use the promo code UNJ when you check out, and you'll get 10% off of that. And then also, helping out our sponsors as the way we go. Get over to Buck's Baits, and if you use the promo code Up North Journal on your checkout, you'll get 20% there. And when you go over to rebel6rubs.com, use our promo code North Journal, and you'll get 20% off of there as well. What you don't see, but you can hear, is if you go to JPO Outdoors, we just talked to him last weekend. Get over to his website. Use the promo code Up North Journal. You're going to get 10% off any of his calls when you check out, and that is used by November 15th. So, without further ado, are you ready for this? It's fish.
Ready.
It's about fish, man.
It's right up my alley, and I'm ready to go.
That's why you're here. That's why I'm here.
Yep.
And Chris Horton is on the line with us. How's it going, Chris?
It's great, man. We're pretty hot down here, too, right now. This has been a very warm September, and we don't really have a lot of relief in sight. So
I tell you what, I was out, it was last weekend. It's supposed to be, well, it was ended the last weekend of summer. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm cutting the grass and I'm sweating bullets here. This isn't right. We're supposed to be getting into the fall thing going on. So you got warm weather down there as well?
Oh, yes. Yeah, we're pretty warm, still in the low 90s, which is a break for us from what we have been the last month or so, but still warm and good old humid south. Fish still haven't started moving up in their shallow waterfall patterns yet. They're still down pretty deep, so we're all anxiously awaiting fall.
Amen to that. It'll get here sometime. Of course, we'll run through Indian summer and everything. But anyways, we just had a show previous to this. We talked all about hunting with Ellery and Andy. But you're the fisherman kind of guy, so we decided we'd have Ken on with me and talk fishing with you and about what you are doing on a congressional level for the fishermen. Can you tell us about who you are and what you do?
You bet. Actually, I started off being a fisheries biologist years ago, and I went to grad school at the University of Arizona, and most people ask, well, why did you go to Arizona to study fish? Well, they actually have some pretty good fisheries out there. But I did a project, and most graduate programs, you need to do a project for a state agency if you want to be a natural resource manager, which is what I wanted to do. And they had a project available for me, and so they put me on a stipend, and I spent 2 years doing some research for the Arizona Game and Fish Department, looking at crappie populations. And when I finished my degree, a master's degree, I went back home to Arkansas and thought, whenever I got the job as the reservoir research biologist and then later the black bass biologist, that I was going to be able to, I was going to stay in my dream job because I love doing it, love working with fish, but just as importantly, I love working with anglers. These natural resources belong to us all, and I love that aspect of it. About 4 or 5 years into my career with the Game and Fish, though, I realized that natural resource management is as much about politics and people as it is about the critter, and working with people and working with anglers to find solutions was something that I was pretty passionate about. And it just so happened that about that time I was working with the Bass Angler Sportsman Society, B.A.S.S., on some largemouth bass virus issues that were going across the South about that time. It made its way across the South, was moving up the Midwest, and we were all trying to figure out, because we'd never seen the virus before, didn't have an idea about what implications it had long-term for bass populations. So collectively, all the states and B.A.S.S. led that effort of bringing us all together with academia to really look at the issue. So I got to know the bass folks, and it wasn't long before they offered me the opportunity to come to work for them. And I thought, you know what, I'm early enough in my career, I'm going to make a change. I'm going to go work for the anglers for a change. So for about 8 years, I worked on behalf of B.A.S.S. and their membership, which is the largest fishing organization in the world at over 500,000 members. And I was working with them in their state capitals across the country, as well as in Washington, D.C., working on freshwater fisheries policy that would benefit bass anglers, and got to work a lot with the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation, because they were the link to those state capitals and to Congress from the sportsmen's community, and developed a great relationship with them. And it wasn't long before they offered me the opportunity to go work for the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation. I could live anywhere in my 14 or 15 state region at the time, which was pretty much the middle of the country, from North Dakota over to Michigan and Indiana, and then down to Texas and Louisiana. So the middle part for CSF's purpose is considered the Midwest. So I got to move back home to Arkansas, where my wife and I are both from, and I've been here just right at 9 years as of last week. And,
you know what? Tell you what, you don't really get into a job too often where they say, "Hey, you can move anywhere you want within these 14 states," and luckily one of them's back home for you.
Yep.
Right. That's
yeah,
awesome.
It was a blessing. Both sets of my grandparents were still alive at the time, and wanted some time to get with them, with the grandkids, and let them spend some more time with their great grandparents, and it was the perfect opportunity at the right time. So we moved from Florida, which is where Bass had relocated to at the time, and moved back home to Arkansas. Now, I did miss the fishing in Florida. I mean, we have great fishing here in Arkansas, but you take a boy from the hills of Arkansas and put me in Florida, I'm going to learn to saltwater fish, because there's always something biting, and there's always something to try to figure out.
Yeah. You know what? It sounded like this job is right up your alley, right?
It is. I mean, it's been great. It's been a dream job, and to work on the issues that are passionate to me, passionate to my fellow anglers, and doing what we can to make sure that we have healthy and abundant resources, and importantly, access to those resources is what it's all about. Well, and the chance to move the needle. Speaking
of that, what are some of the top things you're going after legislative wise for fishermen? What's on the top of the list? Well, when it comes to saltwater fisheries management, which is where most of our challenges are from the federal standpoint, because it depends on which coastline you're on, but state waters run on the east and west coast for 3 miles, and in the Gulf Coast they run for basically 9 miles from shore out, and then anything from 9 miles in the Gulf to 200 miles is considered federal water. So all the fisheries there are under federal management. That's the same from that 3 mile line on the east and west coast out to 200 miles. That's all considered federal fisheries management. And federal fisheries management's always historically focused on the commercial side. They haven't really focused that much on the recreational side, because it's only been in the last 20, 30 years that technology has developed to the point that we can actually we're pretty effective at ourselves at going out and catching our own fish now. Okay, so, I was gonna ask you that, because you mentioned that about the commercial fisheries, but yep. Here we are with technology, the way it's leaps and bounds as it goes, and all of a sudden now the everyday sportsman is heading out there into the waters and doing some fishing. Yep, it's great. I mean, it's great for the resource, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on, about how that effort translates to more money for conservation coming back. But the problem is just that the federal system was built around the commercial management model, which basically counting every pound of fish that's landed. Well, when you have 3 million anglers in the Gulf of Mexico now, it's very difficult to count every fish that they land. So the federal system has been really slow to be able to accurately estimate how many fish we're catching. And the Magnuson-Stevens Act, which is a good act that was passed, was first passed in 1976, has been reauthorized several times, and the last full reauthorization was in 2007, and it put some really strict catch limits on our fisheries out there, which it needed to, because we had a lot of fish
or several fish stocks that were overfished. The problem is the federal system of managing based on hard pound quotas. So they try to estimate.
Oh, okay. They do a lot of estimating then, and kind of seeing the curve.
It's a lot of estimating. I've modeled fish populations, modeled bass populations in Arkansas, all over the state, helping out the district biologists try to figure out what slot limits, minimum length limits, and stuff. But the way we manage freshwater fisheries, for the most part, is we look at real-time data. We go out and sample every spring and fall and in summer, and as well for young year recruitment. But we kind of have a real-time estimate of what's going on.
Okay.
Federal fishery.
So
go ahead.
So you're talking. It almost seems like there's two different methods.
There is
for what's going on. See, Ken, and you were worried about when you get to a boat launch, there's like 5 other people. They're like 3 million people in the Gulf.
Yeah, that's a pretty staggering number. 3 million people. I would have no idea that there's that many people fishing in the Gulf of Mexico. That's just, recreational angling. Right?
That's recreational angling based kind of on state license sales. Now, some of those are fishing from piers and from the beach and from kayaks, but a lot of those are from bay boats. And as you know, the bay boats have been, the technology there has improved too. Bay boats are going further and further offshore. I mean, we go routinely off of Fort Morgan, Alabama. We go 25, 30 miles out in a 24-foot bay boat.
Are they using that real-time technology that Garmin has where they can shoot the transducer out and see the bait balls out in front of them? And
we aren't quite that advanced yet.
Okay.
Okay.
Right. I didn't know.
But, there's plenty of fish out there.
Yeah.
But going back to kind of, and this goes all back to what we've been working on, is the Magnuson-Stevens Act. Even though it hasn't been fully reauthorized, we recently had a victory in Congress that the president signed the Modern Fish Act, or the Modernizing Recreational Fisheries Act of 2018, was signed in at the very end of December, at the very end of the 115th Congress. And it's something that we worked hard on. It wasn't all the changes we wanted to see, but it was quite a few changes to try to help blend fisheries management, the model a little bit better with incorporating recreational into the commercial fishing model. And for the first time, actually, the bill recognizes the significance of recreational angling, the importance of recreational angling.
In other words, you put the recreational angler on the map.
Yep.
You said, hey, here we are, and thank you for signing it into bill, because we need a voice. And like you said, you guys are getting real-time data. Are you finding real-time data is a lot better than the models that they're using on the federal side?
It is. Now, we've kind of got a hybrid going on right now in the Gulf of Mexico. Red snapper was the big issue, and any of your Texas listeners out there know about the red snapper debacle down there.
Oh, red snapper had a debacle. All right, I like to hear debacles.
Yeah, it was a debacle. And ironically, our seasons were getting shorter and shorter all the way until 2017, when we had a 3-day season in federal waters, because the population has rebounded faster than they thought it would. We have more fish out there, so we're encountering them faster. And the average size has gone from like 4 or 5 pounds to now it's 8 pounds. So if you've got this hard pound model where you only catch so many millions of pounds, well, if you've doubled the size of your fish and you have more of them out there, and you estimate how many anglers you have, you're catching them pretty quick. So they kept shortening the season. And part of that problem, the reason they had to do that, was because they were estimating how many recreational fishermen, were out there fishing for red snapper, and estimating how many fish they were catching on any given year. And then they would plug that into the model for next year and project how many fish would be available. On the freshwater side of things, we don't worry about the pressure too much. We actually look at what's going on with the population. And if we see a problem with the population, then we go in to see, number one, is it angler effort or mortality that's causing the declines? Most of the time, it's not in the freshwater system. It's something else environmental going on. But on the federal side, their estimate model of how many fish were even being landed by recreational fishermen just was not accurate at all. And the states finally had enough of it. They started developing their own angler harvest data programs, and basically they're more real time now of what we're actually landing at any point. We're still under this hard pound quota.
I bet you there were some anglers getting mighty upset really quick when they were changing those seasons, closing them down.
It was I'm telling you, it was a debacle, and a lot of frustrated anglers. A lot of anglers just had lost faith completely in the federal system. But fortunately, 2 years ago, when whenever it was announced that we were going to have a 3-day season, the Secretary of Commerce actually artificially extended it 39 days, and NOAA got sued for that. But the suit never went anywhere. But they entered into an agreement with the states called an exempted fishing permit, which allows them to fish outside the normal Magnuson parameters as long as they stay within a catch limit. And basically what they've done for the last 2 years is they've taken that whole Gulf-wide quota, which is about, I believe, after the buffers and everything, is about 5.9 million fish, somewhere around there.
5.9 million fish.
Million pounds, excuse me.
Oh, million pounds.
Million pounds. And then they divided that up based on the historic catches of how many fish Texas was catching, how many fish Louisiana was catching in the recreational sector, how many fish Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida were all catching. And that's the percent quota that they got.
Okay.
So then each state can fish to their percentage of the overall quota. Because the state's reporting system is so much more accurate in real time, they can stay within those boundaries. And actually, Alabama and Louisiana today announced, even though the seasons have been closed for about a month, they announced today that they still have leftover quota that their anglers can go catch. So they're going to have another 3-day weekend season coming up.
Oh, nice. That's awesome.
So are these surveys, or is this like a self-reporting deal that's going on?
It's a little bit of both.
Okay.
And Louisiana has what's called the LaCreel, and they identified about 8 or 9 of the top 12 ports that red snapper landed at, and they have creel clerks there pretty much all day long into the evening hours, making sure they catch folks coming in and count their fish. But they also have the ability, you can self-report on an app, and Alabama and Mississippi require self-reporting on an app as well. As a matter of fact, to fish for snapper in Mississippi waters, you actually have to get a confirmation. You have to call in. They give you a trip number, and you have to have this trip number on you when you're out there fishing. Anglers saw this as kind of a burden at first, but all of a sudden, and we've got much longer seasons. This really does work.
Wow, that is super real time. Not gonna lie,
that's pretty cutting edge stuff they're doing down there. Really,
if you use an app to get a trip number that you need, and if you're checked by your local game official, and you
imagine if they did that up here in Michigan?
Oh, I don't even want to talk about it. It's bad enough. But I tell you what, we're going to bump up on our first break here. For anybody that wants to find out more information about the Congressional Sportsmen, where do we need to go?
It's congressionalsportsmen.org.
Okay. I tell you what, give us a second. We're going to step right out, and we'll be back after this.
PSE Archery has reinvented the way you buy bows.
From now on, you can make the most educated decision possible
by basing your bow choice specifically on your shooting needs and goals.
All you need to do is ask yourself, what kind of shooter am I? What do I want to achieve?
PSE will help find the right category for you.
So, what kind of shooter are you?
Find out at psearchery.com.
Welcome back. Second segment of the show on this special Wednesday night, and still no Mike. That's right. You laugh it up because he's not here, and I like it. I'm kind of getting into this.
You're loving this.
I'm loving this.
You're in the captain's chair.
I'm in the captain's chair.
Driver's seat.
I know, right? I'm liking this. This is awesome.
Need to get you a little captain's hat.
No, let's not go there because then he'll. No, that could go bad. But you know what? We're talking with Chris Horton down in Arkansas, and we're talking about the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation Caucus and what they're doing for fishermen. And like we talked about in the other show, the hunting, the fishing side as well. Also, we wanted to make sure where they get helped out financially by just going to Bass Pro and stuff. When they ask you to do the roundup at the cash register, that helps you out, right, Chris?
Yep. Bass Pro Cabelas is one of our big premier sponsors, and they also donate to other organizations, Pheasants Forever, and Ducks Unlimited, and those others. But for us nonprofits that are out here working on behalf of hunters and anglers, we rely on corporations like Bass Pro and Cabelas to be able to help fund us and to keep us on the job, keep us up there in the state capitals and in Congress working on behalf of recreational anglers and hunters.
So, speaking of that, I had a question in the last show with that. when you deal with the political side with the people, do you find out you have to educate them and kind of maybe take them out fishing?
Would love to be able to take them out fishing more frequently, but yeah, I mean, education is the number one thing we do. And we have to develop relationships with legislators and to be able to convey that kind of information. And that's why we actually try to have state legislative sportsmen's caucus events. So every state, well, 49 states, Hawaii's the last one, but 49 states have a state legislative sportsmen's caucus. And throughout the course of the legislative session, and sometimes outside the session, we'll host a caucus breakfast briefing or a lunch or something at the Capitol and try to invite, representatives from all the sportsmen's groups out there to come and meet with their legislators. We'll talk about some of the policy things that are going on right then, but it's really about developing those relationships. That's the people aspect of it. Develop relationships so that the Pheasants Forever person or the Quality Deer Management Association person or NWTF or B.A.S.S. or the walleye guys, they have these legislators, these policymakers have a resource that they'll reach out to and say, hey, we're thinking about running this bill. What do y'all think about it? What did your members think about it? And, that's kind of the interaction and the real beauty of having those sportsmen's caucuses there is it really provides a platform for education and information exchange. Because
absolutely.
There are so many things that especially freshman legislators just don't know, that don't understand about natural resource management.
That was going to be my next question was, do you see every couple of years you having to go and for all purposes re-educate the new members coming in and say, okay, we have to go through this again.
Yep.
This is what it's all about.
Yes, you do. It's a constant thing, and you get to be pretty good at your various sales pitches, the basic facts and information. But, one thing, there are really two things that really get their attention, and that is one, that it's been hunters and anglers that have funded natural resource conservation for about 100 years.
Right, exactly. We're going to show the amount here from the Dingell Act. $632 million last year alone was brought in for the fisherman side of it. What do people have to buy for that to get helped out with that number? For the Dingell,
anytime you buy a package of hooks, sinkers, fishing line, a rod, a reel, tackle box, all those things are taxed at a 10% excise tax. And it was supported by anglers in 1950 to pass this bill because on the hunting side, Pittman-Robertson had been passed in 1937 that set up the very same program that diverted an 11% excise tax on firearms and ammunition into a separate pot in the U.S. Treasury that goes back to the states based on area and number of hunting license sales.
Right, and the Pittsman Act alone last year was $797 million.
Yep. Yeah, and so by 1950, anglers were seeing what was going on the wildlife side and all the money coming back for conservation, all the habitat restoration. They said, well, tax us. Let's do the same thing on our fishing equipment. So Congress did. They taxed them and put a 10% excise tax on it. And we started generating money for aquatic fisheries management or aquatic habitat management and restoration. And then in 1984, an amendment was passed to that called the Wallet-Brough Amendment. In addition to adding some things like trolling motors to it, it added a motorboat fuel tax.
Okay, and the fuel tax. Okay.
Yep. And that really bumped it up. So yeah, last year was $632 million. It usually averages between $600 and $650 million a year that comes back, and that's just on the taxes alone. If you look at last year's fishing license sales across the country,
the fishing license one, we got a slide for that as well. That we found out here in I guess this is typical, but in Michigan alone, we sell more fishing licenses than we do hunting licenses.
Yep, no, that's pretty common. Fishing is usually a little bit more popular out there as far as license sales goes and the number of participants. And number one, fishing is a little bit easier to get. It's not as intimidating to somebody that's never done it. I mean, it's pretty simple to get a fishing rod and head down to the local pond and try your hand at fishing. Whereas, hunting is a little bit more investment. You really need a mentor to kind of help you get started if you've never done it before.
Absolutely. So, see, Ken, all those fishing rods that you've bought and got on your bass boat, man, you've donated a nice.
I've donated my fair share.
As
many tournament anglers have.
All those lures, man, you're doing awesome. All those hooks, look at you.
Yeah, my wife, when we first got married 27 years ago, I only had like 5 bass rods then. I mean, that was pathetic. I couldn't fish a tournament on 5 rods.
No.
She's like, don't you just need one? And it's like,
Well, I hear that question a lot, don't we?
Yeah.
How many rods do you have on that boat?
I keep about 17 or 18 at any given time, yeah.
All right, Chris, how many you got?
Well, I don't have my bass boat right now, but in the closet, I think I've got about 20 or 22 rods.
Okay, you both are doing well with that tax. Nice.
You need, you got to have a rod for crankbaiting, spinner baiting, the soft plastic swim baits. I mean, there's all kinds of techniques, and of course, you need a different rod for all those.
Got to have it.
Uh-huh. I kind of see where that goes real quick.
Yeah.
You guys walk into your local fisher store, and they got a selection of rods. You probably need a new rod for whatever body of water you might be going on.
There's that too.
You know, so it's amazing. But that's awesome to hear that for the fisheries themselves, the fishermen out there that are the fuel tax and everything that was added to bump up all the programs that you're working on out there are you got something going in all the states, or are you focused somewhere other than anything special?
Well, number one, the thing we just talked about, Wallet Bro reauthorization, it has to be reauthorized every 5 years, and it's due for reauthorization by September 30th of 2020. It has to be reauthorized because it's attached because of that motorboat fuel.
Okay.
It's become a part of the Highway and Transportation Bill, which the Senate is working on their version of that right now. It's already passed out of one committee. We'll work with the Commerce Committee, the Senate Commerce Committee, in order to get what we need in there for Wallet Bro to be reauthorized. The House hasn't begun working on theirs yet, but we are talking to House members and preparing them. So when it is time for them to introduce their bill, that'll be in there too, because we've got to protect that fund. That's $600 million going back to the states for habitat management, for building boat ramps, for all the fisheries research they do. So that's the number one important thing we have to do. The other one is the National Fish Habitat Conservation Through Partnerships Act.
The Conservation Through Partners Act. Okay.
Yep. And basically what that is a program that began in 2006 and really got going in 2007, where if you look at the North American Wetland Conservation Act and how the joint ventures, these partnerships in the duck flyways and addressing priority habitats within the prairie pothole region and even the wintering range here in the South did a wonderful job for restoring our duck populations. And, we went from 3 ducks back in the mid 80s to, at least in the Mississippi flyway now, we can harvest six ducks. And we've had that luxury for several years, and it really is because of NACA. Well, on the fish side, we decided, well, let's look at doing some partnerships like that from the fisheries perspective.
I was going to say, yeah. So you see it working on one side. Hey, now why bring it over to the fish side? Let's see how it works.
Yep, exactly. And so they launched, and I served on the National Fish Habitat Partnership Board for a while when I was working for B.A.S.S as their representative, and for a little while at CSF as well. But now there are 20 partnerships across the country, and they range from something like a regional partnership, like the Atlantic Coastal Fish Habitat Partnership, to the Southwest or Southwestern Alaska Fish Habitat Partnership, the Great Lakes Basin Fish Habitat Partnership, which covers you guys up there in Michigan, and also the Glacial Lakes Partnership, which is more the inland stuff for all your glacier lakes. There's a partnership for that now too. Some of them are species based, like the Eastern Brook Trout Joint Ventures, that focuses on one species that's really imperiled. But if you fix the habitat and can restore native brook trout, you're going to benefit all the other fish species in those systems as well.
Heck yeah, you are. That's awesome. Getting looking at from all over up to Alaska and back, getting all those things put in, especially like trout. Especially, I know here in Michigan, the trout opener to some in April is like almost like typical opening day of deer season for some.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely. Schools used to close down for it.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So definitely that's awesome. And you're definitely seeing, like you talked about the duck side, on the fish side, you're definitely seeing that push forward into the positive direction on things.
Yes, definitely. Those partnerships have been able to complete since 2007, about 850-something projects in all 50 states. And there's really been some significant benefits in those localized areas. What we need to happen, and the reason we have a bill out there, is because it's never been, unlike NACA, or the wetlands and duck side of things, it's never been authorized by Congress. So we need to get it authorized by Congress, really for two reasons. One is that it was managed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and they're great partners, but sometimes you can get a bureaucracy that gets a little bit too top-heavy, and this whole initiative was supposed to be a state and local community-driven partnership-based initiative, and not really a top-down federal-driven initiative. And it kind of got a little bit too much towards the federal side in recent years. So we'd like to see it come back and have Congress put some sideboards on it and say, no, this is going to remain what it was intended to do and how it's been successful. And that's state-driven, local-based partnerships. And two, this will open the door, even though we're only asking for an authorization of $7.2 million. That's what it's been funded at in the president's budget through the last, since 2007. The line item budget in the Fish and Wildlife Services budget has been about $7.2 million.
Okay.
So that's we're not asking for more money now.
You're just asking for what you've had.
What we've got. Yeah,
yep.
What we've got.
And imagine that, Ken. The federal government touched it and it went crazy. Imagine that. Leave it on the state level and everything seemed to be good. Federal touches it and things get a little bit haywire.
Like I say, they're good partners. It's just sometimes it's better to let the local folks and the local scientists kind of drive what needs to happen.
Right? It's like, okay, you're way over there. Don't tell me how to run it over here. Mm-hmm. When I'm looking straight at it. Mm-hmm. Trust me, I run into that all the time. So. And
good news on that front. We've been working on a bill for the last 10 years to get this thing authorized. And just even though it's been bipartisan every time, both Democrats and Republicans support the bill. In Congress these days, it's frustrating to work in. There's a lot of gridlock, a lot of partisan politics, and a lot of good bills that just really aren't high priority, just don't ever make it to the floors for a vote. But we made really good progress today. On the House version of the bill, which was H.R. 1747, it cleared the House Natural Resources Committee now on a unanimous vote and is headed to the floor. So,
that's awesome.
Yep, we've got really good progress there. We'll use that momentum to get the Senate to hear their version of the bill, and then try to get that passed here in the next month or so, or in the coming months, and hopefully we will have a fully authorized National Fish Habitat Partnership within the next by the end of this Congress.
That'd be awesome. I tell you what, get that signed. Do what you have to do and kick some butt and make it happen. Right?
Yep.
So, but anyways, we're bumping up on our next break. Before we leave to go to our break, tell us where we can find out more about what the hunters and fishermen are given. What website we need to go to. Do you guys have a newsletter or something we can sign up for, get alerts or anything like that?
Absolutely. The website is the Congressional Sportsmen, MEN.org. And you can, whenever you go there, there's a tab there for, I believe it's immediate resources, but you can sign up for our the Sportsman's Voice, which basically we report on what we're working on both at the federal level and in individual states. And if you really want to get involved with your local politics, we have a thing called Tracking the Capitals that you can sign up for, and you can customize it. If you just want to look for any fishing-related bills that might pop up in your state capital, you can you can pick your state, number one, or you can look at multiple states, surrounding states, and you can pick different topics to track. And as we see them, we're tracking about 4,000 to 5,000 bills a year in state legislatures across the CSF team. But you can get in on some of that too and track it and get engaged.
Absolutely. You know what? You just said it. The two E's that I'm kind of learning here, we're developing it, is engage and educate. Mm-hmm. Right? So with that, let's step out for this break and we'll be right back after this.
PSE Archery has always dominated the speed category. Now, the most revolutionary cam system ever to hit the market has perfected the shooting experience. Introducing PSE's Evolve Cam System, featuring extremely high let-off capabilities and the smoothest draw cycle in history. No other cam system has ever delivered this level of total comfort and total control. Experience PSE. Experience performance.
Welcome back. Third segment of the show, and still no money. And I'm going to say that every segment because I'm enjoying it, okay? I even got the guest giggling in the background, and You see that IQ test he's doing over there?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
See, there's proof. So, how's it feel to be the co-host?
I love it. It feels good to be behind the UNJ desk and talking a little fishing tonight.
You know what? We brought you on. You're the bass geek.
Yep.
You are.
Yep.
And Chris Horton is on the line with us down in Arkansas. Mm-hmm. But he's like the Midwest guy who covers Michigan and Arkansas. I'm still getting that geography lesson here down. But Ken, being a fisherman here in Michigan more than I am, I'm kind of the land kind of guy every once in a while on a boat, not like you. Mm-hmm. But Chris, what do we got going on in Michigan here that you and Ken can go at here? I know we got some issues in Michigan with the Asian Carp thing going. What do you see going on with that, or what are you doing about stuff like that?
Yeah, well, the Asian Carp question is really a big one. What are we going to do about that problem? Obviously, we want to do everything we can to keep them out of the Great Lakes region. But what most people don't know is that there's a big problem with Asian Carp south of you guys, too, in the Tennessee and Ohio River basins. And matter of fact, that's probably controlling that situation will probably relieve some of the pressure off of fish trying to keep migrating further north and try to get into Lake Michigan. The states of Kentucky, Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, even they're really dealing with a significant Asian carp problem right now that's impacting tourism, it's impacting boating, and so they're actively working with members of Congress to try to figure out some solutions and to be able to get some funding to potentially create a commercial market for these things and to be able to control the populations. We're never going to eliminate them. That's the bad thing about aquatic invasive species. The zebra mussels, quagga mussels, they've been around for a while. We tried to keep them from moving west past the 100th meridian, but we weren't able to do that, and now they're pretty much from coast to coast. So once they're here, it's pretty much what can we do to manage them, and controlling those populations, knocking them back on a consistent basis will keep them from immigrating, which is, instead of immigration coming in, immigration, you see populations of wildlife, fish and wildlife do that whenever there's too many there. They'll try to find other areas to go, and they will oftentimes overcome obstacles to get to other fresher resources. So controlling Asian carp, not just in the potential access points to the Great Lakes, but controlling the flow of Asian carps coming from the central part of the country and reducing the impacts that they're having there is something that we're all focused on.
It's funny you mentioned that because you hear about them in Mississippi and then up in Michigan, but you really don't hear them down in the other states too much. And
yeah, I watching the Elite Series this past year and even the year before, with the elites, Mark Menendez had a lot to say when they were in Kentucky Lake. There was a lot of different anglers at the weigh-ins that had things to say about the carp population. They were saying it right there on the weigh-in stage, and of course, Mark Menendez, as you know, is a fish biologist too, and he's had a lot to say there. And I know Kentucky Lake has got a big problem with it, and now they're worried about them getting into Gunnersville, Nick Jack Lake, Chickamauga, and I follow a couple of these Asian carp groups on Facebook, and it definitely does seem scary. And seems like there's so many different aspects to this. For the longest time here in Michigan, there was a real panic button being hit about these Asian carp. It was everywhere. And I don't know about you guys, but over the past year or so, year and a half or so, it's kind of died off. We don't hear too much. I mean, if you look for it, you can find it. There's not this. It's kind of died off. No one's really talking about it around here anymore. And have you heard anything? I've heard about this electric fence in Chicago.
Yep.
Is there anything new in the works?
Yes, there is actually. There's a huge project that the Army Corps of Engineers has fast-tracked at the Brandon Road Lock and Dam there on the Illinois River, that they're going to go in and basically add some additional barriers besides just the electric fence, some bubble screens, and a number of other, some lock modifications to be able to try to keep those out. So, stopping them from getting into Lake Michigan is still priority. It's a priority of the fishing and boating community. It's a priority of the Corps of Engineers as well, and Congress. So that's one. But again, this has gotten to be to the level that we have to look at this holistically. And again, we've got to stop the flow of Asian carp even headed that way if we can.
Yeah, and another question I had for you in regards to the fish itself. I mean, of course, all but Lake Erie, the Great Lakes are deep, cold, clear waters, and you always hear about these carp thriving in shallower, dirtier water situations, warmer water situations. But, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, parts of the Tennessee River are kind of deep and cooler. They've got cooler, deep current water. They're thriving in there. You hear about they wouldn't be able to make it in the Great Lakes, but like if they ever got into our inland waters, a lot of our rivers connect to all our different lakes, and it would be more of a disaster inland than it would be the Great Lakes. Does that make sense to you, or do you think that's ridiculous?
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. But I mean, you've got a littoral zone or littoral zone, the shallow water areas all the way around all the lakes up there, and that's pretty much where they would occupy, that's where most of the plankton growth is, what they primarily feed on. So, yeah, it would have some trophic level impacts. It would take nutrients. Every body of water, even from a half acre farm pond to Lake Michigan, has a limit to the biomass of organisms that it can support. And if you tie up a lot of that biomass in one fish species over another, then you're reducing that availability for bass and walleye and lake trout and other things. Yeah. And phytoplankton and zooplankton is the base of the food chain. That's what these guys are specialized feeders on. So they would definitely have an impact at the population level to some degree. What that degree is, we don't know, again, because they're not there yet. We hope they never get there. But you would think, just knowing the biology of the fish, that they would tend to congregate in the littoral zones, the shallow water zones. And they would definitely, they do run rivers to spawn, and all the tributaries coming into those lakes would see some Asian carp.
Yeah, I mean, you see all the other carp. I mean, Lake Michigan, especially northern Lake Michigan, as world-class carp fishery. Right now. I mean, guys come from all over the world to fly fish for carp there.
That's a true statement.
And they're thriving. There's carp thriving in the Great Lakes right now. So I never really I'm with you. I never really understood how they wouldn't make it in the Great Lakes. And so it is scary, but selfishly, and this is anecdotal at best, but like, is there any? I hate to even say this, but is there any positive to Asian carp? Would the bass grow bigger because they spawn so prolifically that it's more food for the predator fish to eat to kind of make up for that? But you're saying, they start at the beginning of the food chain, which would hurt everything.
Yeah, that's. It's a pretty tough question to answer. It's all theoretical at this point. I'm thinking back to the round goby when it got into Lake Erie. Right. Everybody thought the smallmouth population was going to crash because they would, predate the nest to a significant degree and just reduce the population. Well, they do, but smallmouth are pretty voracious nest guarders.
Smallmouth
they love to eat them.
Smallmouth in Lake St. Clair is phenomenal. A lot of people go into Lake St. Clair for smallmouth.
Well, and like you were saying, I mean, it just seems like, the goby was supposed to be the end of the world. The rusty crayfish was supposed to be the end of the world. The zebra mussel was supposed to be the end of the world. Now the coagula mussel, I think I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but it just seems like nature seems to find a way to balance it out. But this Asian carp might be a different animal.
Could be. It could be the one that's different than the others. And I know in Arkansas, when we saw zebra mussels come in, colleagues would probably shoot me for saying this, but honestly, it benefited the bass population in the Arkansas River because it cleaned it up.
Yeah. Well, it took Lake St. Clair and totally cleaned it up, and you went through the cycle, and it cleaned up, and now you really don't hear much about it. You take all the precautions if you find them. Mm-hmm. You see them on all the bass. You see it all on the landings about transporting them to other lakes and stuff like that. But I think you might have something there that you talked about, Ken, that Mother Nature kind of has a way to see a problem and fix it.
It seems to be.
It might not be overnight, but it might need a little help. But Mother Nature knows what to do.
And Asian carp does scare the daylights out of me. I don't want him in here for sure, but it just
Yeah, the fact that they are just so prolific, and they're not, they're not a 4-inch or 5-inch round goby. They are, 30, 40 pound. And consume a lot.
I'm kind of nervous running a river or something and needing a football helmet. Okay.
We've all seen the video.
Yeah. I kind of seen the videos. People getting hit in the face with a fish. Don't sign me up for that. If I got to wear a Lions helmet. Well, that's another story, Lions football. But anyways, but yeah, it's stuff like that you guys are working on it at a political level, working with the different groups here in Michigan, all over the 50 states, getting on a state level, finding out what's going on, working in Washington, D.C., getting the politicians, whether they're Democrat or Republicans, kind of getting them together saying, hey, look, this ain't about that. It's about our natural resources and conservation.
And that, I was just going to say, that is kind of encouraging. And you mentioned Democrats and Republicans. It seems like with a lot of the hunting issues and the fishing issues, a lot of the stuff does seem to be bipartisan. There's not a lot of push. Everyone's on the same page, which is very encouraging. Don't matter what side of the aisle you fall on. To me, it's very encouraging that this stuff, almost everyone's in agreement. We need to do better with hunting and fishing.
Absolutely. I mean, the whole caucus structure from when the Congressional Sportsmen's Caucus was formed in the late 80s, it was a bunch of Democrats and Republicans in both chambers said, there's caucuses for everything else up here. Why don't we start a Sportsmen's Caucus? Because, really, fin, fur, and feather transcend party lines. I mean, we all care about the natural resources. I don't care which political party you're from, and especially if you're a hunter or angler. I mean, both my grandfathers hunted and fished and introduced me, and my grandmothers too. Oh, well, one of my grandmothers was really a big fisherman. She was the first fishing memory I ever had was with her. And one set was Republican, one set was Democrat. I mean, I couldn't ever discern as a kid and teenager what their differences were, to be honest with you. Because, anyway, yeah.
That's like it's like the hunting side of it. It's also like the fishing side. If you're on some pier with a whole bunch of people, and whether they're 85 or 5 and they catch a fish, everybody's like, oh, hey, congratulations. It doesn't matter. It's all about that moment of being outdoors, catching a fish, and supporting that person, whether you're on a pier or in a backyard pond around with family.
Yeah, that really is what it's all about. And having a daughter growing up as a teenager, and she loved to hunt and fish with Dad. And while it was cool, we did that. And I never harvested. I didn't harvest a deer for a number of years there. Didn't need to. I mean, I harvested deer before, and I will again in the future. But as long as it was fun for her and the excitement and seeing the joy on her face when she harvested something, that was what was so special about it. And taking kids, and whether it be family, nephews, or somebody's kid that has never fished or hunted before. I mean, that's really special. If you've never introduced somebody to the sport of hunting or fishing, I promise you, it's more satisfying than you actually landing something or harvesting something.
Totally agreed with that. You agree, Ken?
Absolutely. Yeah, I've only had a chance to do that a couple times, and I'm always, every year I put out, if you've never been turkey hunting, come out. I want to take you turkey hunting. I'm always trying to get people to come fishing with me. There's nothing like it.
I know, and that's awesome. And and for 3 segments of the show, we've been talking about what Chris and the group has been doing on that flavor of the political side. But look at it. By the end of the show, we're getting towards the end, heading for our last segment. Here we are talking about getting new people, educating them, engaging them to get out there. And like you said, Chris, it is more, and I'll agree with you on that, because when my daughter harvested her first deer or her first buck, it was more exciting to see those saucer-shaped eyes staring at me that she shot one. It was after the tears started flowing, it was just awesome. Yep. It was just incredible. Yep. But you know what? We're bumping up on our last segment of the show. One more time, where can anybody go to find out more information about what you do for the fishermen?
Our website is the congressionalsportsmen.org, and that's sportsmen.org. And go there, sign up for our newsletter, and get involved.
Is there social media? Do you guys run social media?
Yes, we do. There's also links to all our social media accounts. Yep, there is.
Okay. All righty. With that, we'll step outside of the cabin, and we'll be right back for our last segment of the show.
Acceleration is part of PSE's DNA. PSE pioneered the speed movement. Now they've developed the vapor category to help you find the most powerful bows on the market to fit you.
High speed equates to intense power and building the momentum you need to be successful. Are you a vapor shooter? Find out at psearchery.com.
We made it to the last segment of the show. But I'm still in the chair and no mic around. That's right. I'm happy. But you know what, Ken? We've been talking about fish. You're the fishing kind of guy.
Yep.
And in the break, we talked about something, and we figured, hey, before we get into the personal side of Chris, go ahead, ask him your question about...
Yeah, so I was really wanting to ask this question, and I'm glad we're going to touch on it here on the show. And, Chris, you mentioned you were a bass fisherman. I'm a bass fisherman, and a huge nemesis to us is this weed kill that they do, and I know you're very familiar with it, and... Up here in Michigan, especially here in southern Michigan, they absolutely carpet bomb our lakes with poison, and it really makes it really hard to catch these fish mid to late summer sometimes. It really can be a challenge. And I'm just wondering if you could just kind of reiterate your experience with that. Is there anything from a grassroots level that bass angling associations can do? Is it a state level thing? Is it a federal level thing? What can we do about this?
It's a state level thing, and usually it's a local level thing. It's a local specific to any given lake. But yeah, as we were talking, I've had a lot of experience with that back in my bass days. That was the number one issue that I had to help deal with. And as far as vegetation control goes, there's biological control, which is like grass carp, which probably is not nearly as common up north as it is in the south. But you can eat grass carp. Do not control vegetation. They either don't do anything, or you put enough in there that they eliminate it. So there's no middle ground. So that brings us back to aquatic herbicides. And I know that there's a lot of apprehension about using aquatic herbicides, but if it's applied by a licensed applicator, those aquatic herbicides had to go through millions of dollars worth of testing to get approved to be able to apply to an aquatic ecosystem, and especially an aquatic ecosystem that has human interaction and where we might actually eat a fish from it. And surprisingly, a lot of these chemicals that they put in actually break down to nothing but carbon and water after a few days. Okay. But here's the problem: is the application process and how you apply the aquatic herbicides. Because I've seen where there's been some lakes that I actually worked on as a fisheries biologist years ago, where we needed to control vegetation because it was getting out of hand. It was getting matted up. You couldn't even fish it. But when the applicator applied too much or covered too big of an area at one time, it basically killed all of that vegetation. And after you kill all of it, it's going to decompose, and it's going to start decomposing pretty quickly. And when it decomposes, the bacteria that's breaking it down consumes oxygen. So it takes oxygen out of the water, and you can go to basically an anoxic state, which is your dissolved oxygen is around zero, and you can have a fish kill in those areas. Now, to answer your question about what you can do is, there usually, and what we were instrumental in doing several times when I was with B.A.S.S, is putting together the homeowners association with the bass clubs, with the state natural resource agency folks, with the water management authority there. And it's like, all right, we realize that we're going to have to control some of this vegetation, especially around some people's docks and beaches, that want to boat and the beaches. But how do we go about doing that smartly? And how do we make sure we leave aquatic vegetation in the lake to benefit fish populations? Because I can promise you, vegetation, if you have vegetation in your lake, you're going to have healthy fish populations because it's important. It's important nursery habitat. So getting together, having that conversation, and coming up with a plan, it's not easy, but if you can come up with a plan that, okay, we're going to control. We've seen it where, like Guntersville, it went through a big battle. Man, it's been years ago, back in the early 90s, I guess, where the homeowners were wanting to stock grass carp. They stocked grass carp, and man, it just kind of crashed the vegetation problem. Then it finally came back after the grass carp were dying, so they wanted to do it again. But got together with the bass anglers and kind of put together a coalition and said, okay, we're going to draw on the map where we as bass anglers are going to draw where we want you to leave vegetation. And then the homeowners drew where they needed it controlled. And guess what? They didn't really overlap that much. They found that they weren't really that different. And aquatic herbicides were the way to do that. Just spraying around localized areas, controlling it for the homeowners, but leaving the vegetation elsewhere for the fish populations, and it worked out great.
So so basically you get with them and you develop a plan. You educate them on, on what needs to be done, develop a plan. And like you said, Chris, it really ended up not being that much different from each side of the table, right?
Right, that's it. And now the biggest battle is just keeping that funded through the TV. The Tennessee Valley Authority is what controls Lake Gunnersville, and it's expensive to do the aquatic herbicide applications. So trying to find funding to keep it up so that you keep the homeowners happy that don't fish,
right,
and keep the bass anglers happy that do fish. But yeah, there used to be a kind of a rule of thumb that anywhere from 15 to 40% aquatic vegetation coverage by acres, so 40% of the lake had aquatic vegetation. That's about the max for most situations. So, you've got a lake that's at 80%, man, you're going to struggle catching fish,
right?
Because and you may see some stunning going on with the fish because they can't get to forage. They've got too many hiding spaces. So there is a balance.
There's a fine line.
Right, exactly.
That makes sense. No one's ever brought that part up about if there's too much vegetation, that can hurt it too.
Yep.
I think I've seen that in some of our weed choke lakes up here.
Oh, absolutely. I think Seven Lakes gets that because it's just like weeds everywhere.
Yeah.
But, all right. Any other questions you got for Chris before we go into his personal side?
That was it.
All right. Okay. All right, Chris. Now we're going to sit down and talk a little about Mr. Horton himself. So,
all right.
A few questions for you. So we're sitting around the campfire and we're just talking, and you're going to tell us your best hunting or fishing story in this case. What would it be?
Best hunting or fishing story? Wow. I've got quite a few.
But the one that sticks out, first one that comes to your mind.
The one that sticks out. Okay, I'm from the South, and we're primarily, well, not primarily, but in our area, a lot of Baptists. My grandfather was a missionary Baptist preacher. He was kind of the hellfire and brimstone type preacher. And I remember back, I was, let me think, I was 7 years old, and it was in the summer. And during the summer in the South, we have what's called Vacation Bible School. It's a week during the summer. It's basically for parents a relief, I think. But they would ship us off to church for 4 or 5 hours in the afternoon, and we would make indiscernible art out of popsicle sticks and drink a lot of Kool-Aid and cookies, which I think was the way for the ones that had to work Vacation Bible School to get back at the parents, send us back with all sugared up and such.
Sugared up and send them home.
Yeah. But this one time I had Vacation Bible School. I remember it was a Tuesday or Thursday night. I think it was a Thursday night because we were almost finished. And you get this little certificate that you attended all 5 days. But again, my grandfather was a missionary Baptist preacher and really stern preacher. And my mom gets a call right about, it was probably 30 minutes before I had to leave. Now, it had come a nice, brief summer rain shower, dumped a lot of rain in just a few minutes, just enough to dingy up the creeks a little bit. But I heard the phone ring, and I heard my mom say, okay, but he has Vacation Bible School. And then she just nodded her head and said, all right, I'll ask him. And then she turned to me and said, your papa wants to know if you want to go fishing with him this afternoon instead of going to Vacation Bible School. That's the point that I knew that fishing was special, because it was something God wanted us to do. I said that to my mom.
There you go.
God wants me to go fishing, Mom. So anyway, we went fishing, cane poles, a coffee can full of night crawlers that I helped him dig, and we walked down behind his house and to a creek, and this one particular bend in the creek that forms an eddy when the water comes up just a little bit, and sat there and caught bluegill and red ear one after another. And it was a special day. We doubled up the old chain stringer with 2 fish on each of the clips. And but he kept asking me as we were fishing, he said, "You think we have enough?" And I said, no, Papa, we want to keep fishing. They're biting. So he said, all right. So we kept fishing until we filled that stringer up. And then as we started to leave, he said, all right, you're carrying them. And as a 7-year-old, and he was 6'2", so I was struggling to stay up with him when I didn't have a stringer of fish dragging the ground behind me. But kind of taught me a lesson in conservation. When we got back and we were cleaning those, he said, I made you carry those. I want you to realize we don't have to kill every fish. We get just enough for supper and leave the rest for seed, boy.
Yeah,
and, so
that's a good lesson.
Life lesson right there, right?
Yep.
That's awesome.
I like that.
That is good. All right. Next question. So you do some traveling on your way to your fishing spots when you get time to fish.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of music are you listening to? Are you listening to a podcast? Are you listening to music? What are you listening to on that way to get you all fired up for the fishing?
You know what? It's only been recently that when we built the house that I actually started listening to country music. So in recent years, country music, if you'd asked me that same question about 8 years ago, I would have said pretty much rock and alternative rock. I mean, I was a big Nickelback fan, and that's actually what we listened to a lot when we were going offshore fishing in Florida.
Okay, go back to Nickelback. You're good. I like that.
Uh-huh.
You can go back there anytime. You know what? That's awesome that you started out with there and you came into country. That's cool.
Yeah, it's probably just a reflection of the fact that I'm starting to slow down a little bit more in life. So I'm not quite as energetic as I used to be. But then again, when it's time to go fishing, we do slip some Nickelback in there.
All right, cool. All right. So whether you're out on the boat or you're traveling over a long distance while you're driving, what's your go-to snack? What do you got to have on that drive, or maybe you got to have it out on the boat while you're catching those stringers of fish?
Different foods for those two situations. One is beef jerky. I have to have beef jerky when I'm driving long distance, going to a state capitol or Sportsmen's Caucus event or something like that. I always have beef jerky. Now, when we're fishing, and again, most of my fishing as of late, other than doing some stream smallmouth fishing around here, wading, is mostly saltwater fishing. And for saltwater fishing, we have to have two things on the boat. There has to be a bag of Doritos and a package of Oreos.
Doritos and Oreos.
Yeah, Doritos and Oreos. If we forget those, we're going back because it's not going to be a good day.
Oh, is that what it is? It's not going to be a good day if you don't. Okay, then Doritos and Oreos. See, Oreos for me, I better have some milk around. That's my thing.
What flavor Doritos?
Just
regular.
I like the spicy, but my captain that has the boat, my buddy that I fish with, doesn't really like the spice, so I have to settle for the regular.
Gotta settle for the regular.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Last question on a personal note. You've caught the fish. What's your go-to meal? What are you going to cook up for somebody that says, "Hey, this is my go-to meal that I want you to have or try"? From it could be fish or it could be wild game as well.
Let's stick with fish. I mean, I'm from the South. We're gonna fry it one way or the other.
Gonna fry it.
Yeah, we're gonna fry it, and got a little special recipe that it makes the difference, and that is, and I'll tell you guys, but I usually soak the fillets in pecani sauce. And if you can do it overnight, it's even better. But then go through the regular breading process and deep frying it. But soak it in pecani sauce for at least a couple hours before you fry it. It'll make all the difference. People will say, "What batter did you put on this?" And you can name off any of the Louisiana fish fryer, which is what we have down here. And they'll say, "There's no way that's Louisiana fish fry," because it does make a huge difference.
That's awesome.
Try that.
That little extra unknown thing, and I bet you if you seal that and seal it in overnight, that's got to be awesome.
Yeah, it has a unique flavor.
All right, Ken, you got to make us some. All right, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show, spending an hour with us, talking fish, and about what you do at the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation for the fishermen. A shout out to Ellery and Andy on the other show. What you guys do for us, and just thinking about like you talked about the individual anglers that are out there and fighting the good fight, and just it's awesome. And I want to thank you for that and spending the time with us.
Well, thank you all so much. I mean, it's been a great conversation. I can't believe the hour's already gone, to be honest with you. We could continue talking for another hour easily on the various things that are going on out there. But I appreciate it.
And I tell you what, if you have anything pop up that's kind of like, don't be afraid to reach out to us, and we'll get you on the show, and we'll get the word out as best we can and help you get the word out about whatever something's coming up. If you need help with phone calls or people getting on the phone to their politicians or something like that, give us a shout. We'll get you on the show, and we'll talk about it again.
That'd be great. That'd be great. I really appreciate it. And for all your listeners out there that want to get engaged, I mean, we all have a voice, and we need you to get engaged. We need you to develop relationships with your state Fish and Wildlife Agency folks. They can tell you about the science and what needs to happen, and get engaged whenever we have a a state legislative sportsman's caucus event or something like that. I mean, it's an opportunity to develop relationships, and I promise you, not as many people nowadays as back in my parents, my grandparents' generation for sure, write their congressman or write their state legislator and voice their opinion on things. And we all have the ability to do that. We all have the responsibility to do that. So get engaged. There's ways to do it.
Absolutely. Get engaged. Send an email. It's just as easy while you got that extra 5 minutes at work. And anything from you, Ken?
No, I just wanted to say thanks again. I really... I do have a deep appreciation for organizations like yourself that all the different sportsmen's organizations that hold these politicians, maybe not hold them accountable, but let them know, hey, the sportsmen have a voice. We've got this many people with our association, and it kind of just puts them on notice. What you guys do kind of puts them on notice. Like, there's this whole other group of people out here that care what's going on, and our vote matters too.
Yeah, and we've got skin in the game. We're paying for it.
Exactly.
We're paying for these resources. So I'm gladly doing it.
Yep.
All right, Chris, I want to thank you again. And for us on the podcast, Ken, it's been great having you as a co-host.
Awesome. Thank you for having me on tonight. I love it. I enjoyed myself and can't wait to come back and do it again.
No problem. I'll sit over in this seat. No problem at all, and have you on the show again. But that'll do it for us on the podcast and on the live show. We don't know when we're going to air this episode. It'll be later on. But with that, we'll call it a night. We'll see you later.
And don't forget, you can catch us in syndication at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on goodtalkradio.com. This episode was brought to you by
PSE Archery,
Spot Shooters Archery,
Easy Cut,
Packer Max,
Hunter's Blend Coffee,
Scent Lock,
Scent Blocker,
Lim Walker Game Calls,
Buck Baits,
Gut Check,
Stanislavski Release Aids,
Copper John,
Fourth Arrow Camera Arms,
Wind Sense Vapor Hunting Products,
and Rebel 6 Rubs.
Thanks for listening, and join us again here next week. Until then, remember, as we always like to say, if you're out on the water or in the woods, shoot straight and be safe. Until next week on the Up North Journal.